Good evening, everyone. Welcome to yet another edition of Global Franchise Leaders Forum. My name is Sachin Maurya, and I'm President for Franchise India. I'm joined this evening in India with two very distinguished franchise experts. First, I would like to welcome Mr. Dan Rowe. Dan is a very senior professional in franchising with decades of experience both as franchisee and franchisor, and now one of the most sought after names when it comes to franchise expansion, both in America as well as rest of the world. So welcome, Dan.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. I'm also joined by my colleague and a very senior professional from franchise fraternity, Venus Barak. Venus is CEO for Fran Global, a company which is dedicated to market entry through franchising, operating in many countries with 1.5 decade of experience in India on franchising, and having pretty much worked with all continents, major companies, as well as a lot of startups. So welcome, Venus. Great to have you both on this program. Just a bit about Global Franchise Leaders Forum. It was started during this COVID times with an interest to connect a lot of experts from all over the world to bring in knowledge, expertise, and also help us understand the challenges we are facing because of this COVID times. So before I pass it on to Venus to take on and introduce Dan, I wish each one of you are doing well and coping well with these COVID times. So over to you, Venus.
Thank you so much, Sachin, and a very good evening for people joining us from this part of the world, and a very big good morning for our guest and speaker today, Dan Rowe. Thank you so much for joining us, Dan. He's the founder and CEO of Fransmart. Now, Fransmart is one of the top franchise service companies in America. And its motto is to fuel franchise wealth by connecting entrepreneurs with emerging franchise concepts. They've sold over 5,000 franchisees in 20 years worldwide, with brands like which a lot of you would know, Five Guys, Qdoba, the Halal Guys, Vapiano, among many more. Fransmart also invest in emerging concepts, primarily to scale. And if there's one thing, if you follow Dan on social media, if you have met him in any of the franchise events, or if you know him, is Dan has an eye for emerging concepts, which can be taken to the next big thing. And he has a very strong belief. And that belief comes from his background and real experience and skin in the game in franchising, and using it as a medium to scale a brand and create wealth for all of its stakeholders. So Dan, a big welcome to you, and thank you so much for joining us today. I think there's so much to learn from you, but if a lot of audience who are joining us or join us later or would hear this might not actually know the bandwidth of your background and your experience. So if you can start with just kind of, sharing your experience and your background so people are just more aware. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you. Sure. So, gosh, I've been in this business for 30 years. So I started off, I used to wash dishes, and I was a short order cook in high school. And then I got into technology, made some money, and 30 years ago, I bought a franchise. I bought a restaurant franchise. And the company I bought the franchise for was only a 6-unit little, it was a bagel bakery, bagels. But they had 6 locations, and they were willing to sell a 23-year-old a franchise. So I bought the franchise. And the company was based in Washington, D.C. We opened in Denver, Colorado, almost 2,000 miles away. And we didn't really know at the time. We didn't really know at the time that what kind of challenges would come with that, because we were very far away from the company or from the brand name. I didn't really know what I didn't know. So like with supply line problems, any support from the franchisor, we were pretty much on our own. But I made a deal with that company. I said, if I prove you outside of DC, because all their stores were in DC, I said, if I prove the brand outside of DC, I also want to be the guy selling all the franchises. And so we opened up. We were more successful than any of the restaurants in Washington, DC. I got the rights to do their franchising, and we grew them from 6 stores to about 200 stores. And then we sold the company. We sold the company to the company that owned Popeye's Chicken. So big company. Okay. One of my restaurants in Denver was across the street from the original Chipotle. So Chipotle won. So that was the second time that I saw a startup concept, right? So one was a 6-unit bagel. The next one, I saw Chipotle when there was one. And we couldn't talk Chipotle into franchising, but somebody in Denver copied them with a company called Qdoba Mexican. So I found Qdoba when it had one store only open for like 90 days. And we just sold the bagel chain. I approached Qdoba and I said, I want to grow this all over the country. And so we did. We basically grew it from one store. We did maybe the first 300 or 400 franchises. And then we sold that company to Jack in the Box. And then after that, we started a company called Fransmart with the idea of, instead of growing one company at a time, we wanted to do it more like an incubator, right? So sure. We wanted to get a bunch of different brands. And we were as successful as we were quite stupid. We made a lot of dumb mistakes. Because I was arrogant and I thought, hey, I was good with this company. Anything I work with is going to be a home run. And just was not the case. So even though we had some successful years, we also had some very painful years. But I got lucky that one of the first brands that I grew in Fransmart was Five Guys Burgers. So Five Guys Burgers, it took them 10 years to get to only 4 locations. Actually, the original Five Guys, it's not a lot of people know this. The original Five Guys restaurant closed. So it failed. And then they opened 4 more. And I approached them and I said, I want to help you grow this into a national chain. And so we did that. So we became their franchise partner. I actually wound up becoming a partner in the first franchise location. It was the only franchise where the parent company actually signed the lease and they assigned it to us, which was another good lesson because I got into the franchising business with no personal guarantees. Part of what I negotiated with the founder of Five Guys is I said, well, you've already guaranteed the lease. There's no reason for 2 of us to guarantee the lease. I don't want to tie up my assets. So I said, I'll sublease it from you and you stay on the lease, right? And he said, that's okay, because if you fail, I'm going to take the store over anyways. So it worked out, but we grew Five Guys from, one location into, I think we sold the first 400 or 500 or something like that. And then we got bought out. So that's really our model. And all along the way, we always invest in brands. So we always like to, anytime that a company needs money, we're hoping that we can invest in it too, because I actually see that brand a year before most investors are ever going to see it. I know what to look out for about what I think the concept can become. I have better optics into the numbers and into the management team and their decision making. And so all along the way, we've always invested. And then just in the last several years, we started to put together funds, organized normal funds, and we're now on our 3rd fund, and it's going great. So it's a business. This is all I know how to do, is I know how to find a concept that I think can go from a couple to a couple hundred and sell the business. And it's just sort of a lap that we do over and over and over again.
That's again, I think there's so much to sort of break down in it. But what I sort of really took down notes, because it's important, is one is I think you see concepts which are at a conceptual level, like you saw Qdoba, which I know now is a 700 store brand. This is, I think, next to Chipotle now in terms of its numbers and its branding. And then you proof it, you scale it, and then you sell it. Now, this is a journey, and it's not a very easy journey, because I've spent last 15 years almost working with franchisors and franchisee. They're not an easy bunch. It's a difficult business. You're working with small and medium enterprises, great guys, entrepreneurship. But I think I want to kind of really go back to basics, since you have an eye for it. What do you really see in a concept? when you kind of go, and because there's so many of those now. I mean, especially in America, same thing in India. There's a concept coming, at least 10 of them every day. So, what do you see in a concept, and then how do you actually go about and evaluating it? Because I'm sure now you would have a pipeline of brands who will come in, Dan, please work with us, right? So what do you see in a concept and how you actually evaluate it? Because that would give a lot of insights into, let's say, either a franchisor or even franchisees to kind of look for in a business.
Well, we're quite backwards. So we usually are not thinking the way most smart people think. But I always look at the end first and then work my way backwards, right? So with Qdoba, I knew that there was already Taco Bell. It was a chain here in America that had thousands of locations, and nobody else. There was nobody else other than Taco Bell that had that kind of scale. And I said, I'm never going to be the biggest. There's a really good book on marketing called The 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing. And one of the rules is, if you can't win the game that you're in, invent a game that you can win. So we take this to heart. So where my comment with Qdoba was, Taco Bell was already thousands of units. I'm never going to catch those guys. So Qdoba was doing it different. They were doing a fresh Mexican, right? Nothing frozen, no freezers in the restaurant, fresh Mexican. And I said, I'm never going to be the biggest Mexican, but I can be one of the biggest fresh Mexican concepts. And so we literally created a subcategory under Mexican. And we said, we're going to be the leader. Chipotle had one, we had one. There was another company that had 2 or 3, and that was it. And so I knew it. So that became my mantra. And I said, can I get this company from 1 or 2 stores to 1 or 200 and then sell? And I knew it because the way that we look at it is we go after the busiest mass gathering areas of the top 40 or 50 media markets in North America, right? So the New York being the biggest, or, Los Angeles, all the way down to smaller markets like Richmond, Virginia. And I said, will this concept work in each of those markets? And I just know it because we've been there forever. We know all the best real estate. We know anecdotally how we get numbers from Chipotle, Panera, Starbucks. We just know how everybody's doing. And I go and I look at all these areas that have proven outside concepts that have come there and proven that they're successful. And so we start first of saying, can this concept grow into the hundreds and hundreds of locations? And then how are we going to do that? Then we want to look at the specific concept that I'm choosing, right? So I'm first trying to figure out, is there even room in this for a category like this? Then I look at this specific brand and I said, do they have the right unit economics, right? Unit economics is probably the biggest driver anybody should be looking at, because customers vote with their wallets. And if they're not voting to come to your restaurant, then there's no point having any more conversation. So we want to know, is the top line there? Is the bottom line there? What does the ROI look like? Like we look at, what does it cost to open a location? What eventually is the profit? And we look at whether or not a franchisee is going to choose to reinvest profit to open up more stores. And it's sort of, we'll talk about in a little bit. But, and then we get to management. Is the management smart enough to do it? Or are they savvy enough to basically put the right people in the right places and do it the right way? And I've started with a bunch of brands. Like I told you earlier, we've made a lot of mistakes picking brands. Sometimes we pick the right brand and the wrong management team.
Sure.
Because money does weird things to people. And so all of a sudden, if you take someone, who has never had money or hasn't really had success, we go fix their concept and start to grow it. And they get on the cover of magazines and they're making more money than they've ever made. All of a sudden that can do weird things to people. So, I go back to Five Guys. We got there, it took them 10 years to get 4 stores. 10 years later, there were 1,000 stores, 1,000, right? So we got bought out along the way. I went to another burger brand. And so you would think that, gosh, I knew a lot before, but really I knew a lot after the Five Guys journey. And I went back to I went to another burger brand, and it was like, no matter what, this was a great concept, in my opinion, even better food. But every time I would try to coach the owner to make a left turn, he wanted to make a right turn just to show me that he was smarter. And at every step, he just wasn't listening. And so where that concept should have been the number 2 behind Five Guys, it never got there. And so, that's something that I've learned the hard way is like, it doesn't matter how much I think that the brand can grow or what the opportunity is for the brand. If you get the wrong owners and the wrong ownership, then nothing good's going to happen. This particular owner not only wouldn't listen to us, he chose to franchise, and for obvious reasons, because you're leveraging other people's money and you're leveraging other people's balance sheets and personal guarantees. But he hated franchisees. And so it just turned out that he just didn't like franchisees. And a lot of times franchisees, he hated them because they would basically point out problems or mistakes or holes in the system. He hated franchisees who became more successful. We had a couple of franchisees that opened up sales to really high volumes. And instead of embracing it and being excited for the royalty and what that meant for the chain, he took it as a kind of a personal attack because this franchisee was more successful than him. So that's the kind of stuff we look at. We start with the end in mind. We know we want to grow something to, 500 or 1,000 stores, and we'll get out somewhere along the way. We just want to know that there's room for that. We want to know then that the economics work, because I can fix everything else. We want to know that the management team is going to get there. Either they can, or we're convinced that they're going to bring in the right people to do the right things. And then there's a whole bunch of other stuff. We have this whole thing, attributes of the ideal brand, it's 100 items that we go through. And then we also use that to integrate a new brand, because for us, it's like a gap analysis. It's here's where they are, here's where they need to be. And either they're there, or do we think that we can close that gap? And if we can, you're going to have another Halal Guys or something like this, right? And so Halal Guys is a good example because, we've done maybe 50 deals in the Middle East, selling American brands over to the Middle East. And I always would go over to Middle East and, I'm over there looking at real estate, building supply lines, learning the local culture, meeting my franchisees. And, we would have, the first night you always go to dinner, like at their house, right? They're impressing you, their nice houses and their servants and all this other kind of stuff. Then the second night, they're like, where do you want to go? And I said, I want to go eat some street food. I want to go eat some like local food. And they would take me to these places that just had the best food I've ever eaten, and long lines of people. And it was just like chicken over rice with like a sauce on it. And I'm like, big long lines of anyone from taxi cab drivers to wealthy people, and everybody's standing in line for this food. And I get in the back of the line and I eat it like everyone else. And then I understand, it's like, that's amazing. And all of a sudden a light bulb went off in my head. I'm like, there's 1.5 billion Muslims. There's no brand that if I go to the local where I'm in DC, if I go to the local Panera Bread or Starbucks or McDonald's and I say, tell me about who is one Muslim actor, singer, apparel brand, technology company, restaurant concept, nothing. Yeah. And I said, there's 1.5 billion Muslims. Why? And the food's amazing. Like, why don't we have a concept like this? And so I actually started trying to get concepts from Dubai or from Saudi Arabia, from Kuwait. I said, you guys have these amazing concepts. Let me take your concepts to America and I'm going to go help you guys grow a chain. And they weren't interested. They just kept wanting to buy our American brands because they wanted a brand, right? And I would tell them, I'm like, you guys have better concepts here than the stuff you're buying. The stuff you're buying, even people, some of the brands that they were bringing over were concepts that were failing like crazy in America, but they're buying the franchise rights to them in the Middle East. Right. I'm like, you're sitting on gold mines right in your backyard, but they didn't want to do that. So I don't know, sort of maybe a long answer to your question, but
I think it's a very interesting, and there's so many sort of follow-up questions I have, but I want to bring in Sachin now. Sachin, you want to come in and
That's very exciting conversation. Both of us were very attentively listening to what you were saying, Dan. So at Franchise India, we call it a PCM of business. So physics, chemistry, math is a simple form. So while physics take care of the product and the market gap, the market opportunity that we are looking at, maths is very important. We look at ROIs, we look at top line opportunity, bottom line opportunity, but what remains in the center of the business is the chemistry between the franchisee and the franchisor. So while it looks very simple, and you've been very humble in putting what you've done, but compliments to you and your team, what you've achieved. Really, when it comes to the chemistry of doing business and doing it in different geographies, some of the experiences that you feel you would like to share in terms of challenges you face, whether it's halal guys taking to international markets or bringing it into US, or some of other concepts that you've led.
Yeah. So honestly, to me, there's no difference growing a company from anywhere in the world as it is to grow it in America. The same things apply. If you don't pick the right location, if you don't have the right operator, if you're not focused on getting it 100% right every time for every customer, you're not going to have success whether you're in a different country or a different city. And so, with Five Guys has closed locations domestically. Chipotle is closed domestically. Starbucks is closed domestically. And so, you've got to pick the right spots. You've got to, there are obvious things like if you can't get, like we deal with this right now with Halal Guys. Halal Guys is 100% certified fresh halal chicken in every location. And there are some international markets where the only way you can get a reliable source of halal chicken is frozen. And we're not doing it. And so I deal with that. But other than the supply line issues, to me, it's the same thing. And so, we're in Southeast Asia, we're in Europe, and, you've got examples of successful and less successful. And every time that you go back and look at what makes the people successful, what makes the people that are struggling, it's the same thing to the same question here in America. People either aren't following the system, or they picked a bad location, or even though they opened up successful, like this is what happens anytime a Halal Guys open, there's a line around the block, is that if you don't take care of every single customer, they're not coming back. They're not coming back. And that doesn't matter where you are in the world, they're not coming back.
Sure. So, Venus, you want to take up the
Sure. I have one more thing which I want to discuss with Dan before I actually go back to the questions which we discussed was, Dan, in this part of the world, and you would have seen it because you have been to Dubai and the Middle East, is franchising is very much driven by American brands. For example, in India, we do not have any franchise specific laws or regulations, but it pretty much operates the way, like, the royalties, the structure, it actually is very much similar to what you would have in the US. And US, like you mentioned, concept, proof, scale, and sale. I know that is quite popular and common in the US, franchising, doing this and then getting sold and then getting compounded. But in this part of the world, it happens quite a bit, but not as much. I think, but franchising as a vehicle, as a concept, is here to stay. And I think more and more entrepreneurs, when they open their first store, second store, third store, are already looking at thinking, okay, can I franchise it and take it to 100? But the mindset, this is my observation, Dan, is the mindset which is required to do from concept to proofing is a bit different than from scaling to sale. Because as you kind of brought in the point that sometimes it's not, you might have the right concept, but the wrong entrepreneur, egos. So I think give us some sort of in your insights working over the years, working with different brands, is how a franchisor should look at these two things and what kind of mindset they should be looking at within themselves to first concept and proofing, which I think is there, but to scale and sale, which I think which needs to happen much more in our markets, according to me.
So if we should talk about it later too, because the same thing I did with Halal Guys for Middle Eastern halal food, I'm doing with Indian. And so
I know you are curry.
But it started with me trying to talk Ahmed Berman into franchising one of his brands. And so
Light Bite Foods from India, yes.
So so I'm looking at that. He's the authority, super successful. He's got all these brands. There's a real soul. There's a real DNA. There's actually a real story there. There's people that eat his food. I said, I'm taking that to America. Then I'm going to take it to Europe, Middle East. Couldn't even get him to think it.
Too big, actually too big. They're too big.
Yeah, maybe. But I mean, there's Five Guys right now is probably worth $3 billion. So if you do this right, there's reason to focus on it. So, what was your question again?
I think from the scale to sale,
yeah,
not everybody. I think I would say only about 5% of guys get this. And I know I mean, from concept to proofing to go to from, let's say, 5 to 15, 20 stores, it still has become, I would say, a trend. But from there to go to 300 stores, it's still, and I think that in America America has perfected that. And I go and meet brands who have done this. So I think few pointers and few indicators you would want to share that franchisor should, because India has some great concepts. As you can imagine, you are in Middle East, India is much bigger, much diverse, and we have so many sort of concepts, right? So how a franchisor should kind of think about from scale to sale, like, from 50 to 500 units.
Yeah, so a franchisor, no matter what size they are, should think about the end first and then work backwards, right? So they should think about the end, keep the end in mind, because that drives all your decisions. And I'm always surprised that franchisors look at franchisees just for the franchise fee, the upfront franchise fee. And what they really should be looking at that franchisee for is the long-term value, right? The LTV of that franchisee. And so you think about it, if I sell a 5-unit franchise of any of my brands, that's $150,000, $200,000 in upfront fees. That's great. It's a lot of money. That franchisee opening $1 million store, paying us 6% royalty, 2% marketing, another 2 or 3% on the supply line, because if you create a marketplace for your stuff, that's another revenue center. And so you're talking about a franchisee that pays you $100,000 a year for 10 to 20 years. If he opens 5 stores, he's paying you $500,000 a year, or $5 million over 10 years. And, when you think about a franchisees prepay you to come into your system. They're prepaying you to come into your system. They're taking all the financial risks, signing the leases, building the restaurant, hiring the people. They have to operate the restaurant your way all the time. So if you started off as one concept and then you changed, like you reinvented your concept, the franchisee has to do that too. And so a franchisee is basically growing your ability to sell the company for a lot of money. And your alternative is if you went out and raised money to go grow company stores, then you're diluting yourself, right? And you're getting partners anyways. And so, but if you have franchise partners and you focus on what does it take for that franchisee to succeed. So if I were a franchisor, all I would focus on is what do I need to do so that, you think about it, the ideal franchise system has 500 or 1,000 locations with only like 50 franchisees, maybe 100 franchisees, right? So when you think about, because if I'm a franchisor and I have to send somebody on an airplane to Miami, Florida, to go look in on a franchisee, all that cost for that person and the travel against one royalty, right? That's a certain metric. If it's that same one person against 10 royalties, right? All of a sudden, big multi-unit franchisees are way more profitable for a franchisor. So one of the things that we do with all of our brands, we build a financial model that actually shows you. Now, guys, look what happens if in the first year we sell only one deal per quarter, but each one's a 5 or 10 year deal. What about the second year? I sell something every other month, 5 or 10 year deal. The third year and every year thereafter, what if I only sold one new deal a month, one a month? But those become then at that point, because you've got so many multi-unit franchisees, you're more likely to sell 10 and 20 unit deals. That's the surest way. And it's mesmerizing to watch the compounded effect of all of these restaurants opening, all the fees, all the royalties, but it's never a whole lot of work because most of it is subsequent openings, right? So a franchisee needs less hand-holding over time. And so what franchisors ought to focus on is what does it take so my franchisees want to voluntarily spend their profit to open up more stores, right? And I told you about a burger brand earlier where those franchisees hated the franchisor. They keep buying my other franchises, but they won't build any more of this guy's store. They refuse to they don't want to make him any wealthier than he's already become. He's a clown. So, and if you think about who's going to buy your company. So when I say start with the end in mind, it's this idea of growing to hundreds of units with only a few franchisees. but it's also what happens when I want to go sell my company. The buyers of your company are basically buying a story, right? They're basically buying it at this point with the idea that they're going to keep going to, this point. So if you've got a lot of one unit franchisees, or even worse, you have a bunch of turnover, you have a bunch of franchisees that get in your system and that leave, or if you get franchisees that come in your system that buy territories, but only build one or two and then they're done, those buyers are basically going to look at you differently. They're going to pay a much smaller multiple. They're already going to know that you're struggling financially. And so you're going to wind up selling at a very, very different price than if all of your franchisees are building 5 or 10 or more stores. So like Halal Guys, I don't think that they'll ever sell. But right now, the average Halal Guys franchisee has 5 stores. We have several franchisees with 5, 10, 15 stores. And these franchisees keep growing and they keep buying more territories. And so for the franchisor, you think about it, it's like I have to do this much handholding on a brand new franchisee in a brand new market. When he opens on his first location, when he opens his second location, I only have to do this much handholding because the supply line's already in place. Right. I know his real estate. Half the employees of his next store work at his first store. This third location, half again, and so on. And so you get to the point where after 4 or 5 stores, franchisor does relatively nothing for their fees. Yet the money just keeps going and going and going. So as the stream of revenue goes up, the effort per dollar goes down, creating this big gap of profit. So if you want to ever sell your company for a lot of money, that's what bankers look at. Bankers look at, and you may get a whole other turn on the multiple, depending on the the gross profit per franchisee, the integrity rate. Like if you see these articles all the time where someone says 10 unit deal, 50 unit deal, 100 unit deal. I've been at this a long time, so I save those clippings and I go back and look a year, 2 years later, and they never happen.
It never happens.
So very few happen. But that's my advice to a franchisor is like franchising only works if you get wealthy and your franchisee gets wealthy, right? So the whole that's our mantra at Fransmart is like we want to get wealthy, helping people get wealthy. In franchising, it's the only way it works. If a franchisee struggles, that franchisor is never going to become wealthy. And likewise, if the franchisor struggles, like a franchisee should never want the franchisor to take less and less and less and less, because then they can't perform and they can't thrive. It's got to work on all sides. So franchisors have to care that their franchisees are getting wealthy on their business, because that's what's going to drive their profitability and eventually their like a life-changing liquidity event.
That's very well put. And I think it's all about value creation. If you don't create value, then the subsequent stakeholders which might join you won't be able to you won't be able to attract them. I do agree. Sachin, I want to bring you in and I think maybe extend upon this compounding effect of wealth creation. I know that in India and in Middle East, where I work very frequently, there are a lot of examples of people buying into international brands, opening multiple units and actually having that effect and becoming sometimes billion-dollar organization, public organizations. Sachin, you want to come in and kind of put that into Indian context and sort of really sort of elaborate on this compounding effect of wealth creation of franchising.
Yeah, that's very exciting. So, I'm gonna come to understanding this wealth creation which you champion, Dan, and how you, for yourself, your partners, your companies that you work with, you've been able to sort of bring this great thought together in their mind about wealth creation through franchising. So you want to elaborate on that?
Sure. So early on in my career, I read this book. I still think it's the best book I've ever read on business and on wealth creation. It's called The Richest Man in Babylon. It's a 1 hour read, but you'll get everything you need to know in the first 10 minutes. But it's this idea that you invest in something that generates free cash flow. Take the free cash flow instead of buying a Tesla or buying wasting the money. Take that cash flow, put it into something else that generates more cash flow. Take the cash flow of those two things and put it into something else that generates cash flow. And then you get to this point where it snowballs. Warren Buffett, one of the richest men in the world, one of the most famous investors in the world, says the surest way to get wealthy is from compounding returns. So we call it blitzscaling. It's just sort of a funny name that we gave it at Fransmart. But it really is this idea that if a franchisee, like at Five Guys or Halal Guys, we want to build, and this is the other thing franchisors should do. They should not build expensive or make their franchisees build these expensive novelty, ego driven restaurants. They should build it as little as they need to make it function. So with Five Guys, our first franchise, the one that we took over from Five Guys, it was a McDonald's. McDonald's moved to like a half mile away. We took over the McDonald's and we told our contractor, don't move a light socket, don't move the hood, don't move anything. We're basically going to go do a low cost conversion. We opened that thing for like maybe 150,000 US. We got our money back in months, not years, months. And then we opened a second one. And the second one was a converted failed restaurant that we got all our money back within a year. And then the profit of those two stores built 4 more, right? So at some point we were getting profit on 6 locations, even though we only put the money up for 2. And then at the end, we get a second bite at the apple where Five Guys bought us back for 6 times profit. And so when you look at how little money we put in to how much we got out altogether, it was like 10 to 1. It was just a really big deal. So to me, that's my idea with blitzscaling. We just sort of wanted to give it a name. We give it sort of we made a video that we share with our franchisees, but it really is this idea that, look, take your profit and put it into more things that make more profit. The Richest Man in Babylon, I think, was written for real estate, but it's the same idea. You buy property, you get rent, you reinvest that into more property and scale, so on and so forth. But I use it for franchising because if you're smart, especially in this climate right now, there's so many great home run locations that can be inexpensively converted to a brand new concept. So right now is probably as good a time as I've ever seen in the restaurant business for something like this to happen. But the compounded effect of returns comes when franchisees want to take their profit to put it into more restaurants. And that's also how it's how a franchisee gets wealthy, because they stop taking money. It's like a house money, right? If you gamble, you basically, the hardest money in Las Vegas is the money you take out of your pocket. And then as soon as you start to make money, it's easy to reinvest the house's money because it's not yours. And so that's sort of the way that we look at it is like, build your first couple of restaurants, get to the point where those will self-fund. You're then going to want a long runway, because when you really look at compounded and then your imputed returns, you could get really juiced up about ridiculous returns. And then you never have to sell it. You just may have a bigger ATM machine than you ever dreamed originally. But then the benefit of also knowing that, but I could also sell this for a lot of money if I ever wanted to, or sell some of my restaurants for a lot of money. That's how you get wealthy in franchising.
Yeah, I know somebody in the audience is enjoying this conversation because he's done it beautifully in Mumbai. His name is Ashok Mukhi. Mr. Mukhi is attending. Namaskar, sir. That's a beautiful explanation, and I think this is one of the things that is exciting about franchising, which is a multi-trillion-dollar industry. One of the, it's always good to sort of educate the community with certain failures in life that you would have also seen, while with your vast experience of 30 years, you would have mastered this art. But I think during the learning years, you would have fallen a few times before you learned it hard way. So you want to share some of your failure things as well?
Yeah. So, I mean, and they were all self-inflicted wounds, like a self-inflicted wound. I did it to myself. But even though, I either picked the wrong brand, I either picked the wrong concept. I thought the concept could be something great, and it just didn't work. I took my eye off the ball. There's been a couple of times too where I got involved with a concept that was a good concept, and instead of focusing more of my energy on that brand, I went out looking for another concept, because I'm a deal junkie and I'm always looking for the next thing. And that's a mistake. Was not educating my brands enough. Like, I should have spent more time with my brands on the things that I know it takes to be successful, instead of out there looking for more concepts. But it all comes back at the end of the day. At the end of the day, if the units don't work, the whole thing doesn't work. And so why does a unit not work? It's either you picked a bad brand, no one likes it. You picked a bad location, you're executing wrong, you're not running the restaurant the way that you're supposed to. You're not taking advantage of marketing, but it's all been on my stuff. And I've had it with, there was the one time I wanted to get into Asian so bad, and there was a company here, a chain here called PF Chang's, and PF Chang's was actually started by PF as Paul Fleming, is a Caucasian, a non-Asian, and I think his chef was Asian, but it was the main business driver was not Asian, and he created this concept that people waited hours to get into. And I said, I've got to find something in this space. And so I picked a brand, and I picked wrong. I picked the wrong brand. It was a concept that I thought it wasn't perfect when I got there. And I thought I could fix it as I grew it, right? I thought I could fix it and make it good as I grew it. And that was just one of these arrogant examples of where I thought, I thought I could make anything work, and I couldn't. It turns out that this was a 10-year-old concept that struggled all 10 years because of the owner. And so now that I'm his new partner, at the end of the day, he's still the same person making the wrong decisions. And every time I try to go left, he goes right or whatever. So, but there's been a couple of those. And then the other thing that I wish I could have done different is I wish I would have said no more often, because all I have is my time. All I have is the amount of time. When I think about how much time I waste on the wrong brands, on the wrong people, or even on a concept that if it gets to the point where I say, I don't think this is going to work, I need to get out now. Like, I need to stop now and free that time up to go do something better. And if I look back on my 30 years, as successful as I've been, I feel like I've wasted 2/3 of my time.
Wow.
Yeah. That's always a learning time, right? So the things that you miss, but the thing is, it's all behind you, and you're very successful right now. So Venus, your question. We've got a couple of questions coming from the audience.
Sure. First of all, I think I want to tell everyone that The Richest Man in Babylon is actually available free on YouTube. So
Nice.
you can actually just listen to it on a weekend. And
No
I
excuses.
love no excuses. And I think I love the word deal junkie. I think that's a very catchy way to put it, deal junkie. I think I'm going to use that, Dan. I have two sort of, not questions, but I think things I want to put out there. And they're two different things, but I think it's might relevant to our discussion. One is, so when I started in franchising, this is about almost 14 years back here in India, while working with franchise consulting, which was just starter franchisors. And what I realized was that, and as you mentioned, Dan, that this is a great concept. I would see a concept and I know I can, we can take this to 100 locations, but the mindset was not right, and sometimes I think in my view, franchising is actually a mindset as well. Somebody who sort of, builds a concept might not be the best franchisor. And I think in my experience, that has been a key for me to understand when I go and meet people is to really sort of, have that classification. So I just want your feedback on what is an ideal franchise mindset, both from a franchise and a franchisee perspective, because sometimes we get these franchisees, they know sometimes too much and they have too much feedback and they just want to change everything. So a franchisee mindset and kind of what are the, it's not about the monies, it's not about how smart they are. It is something that if they understand that they have something which can be taken to different locations, but without direct control and without their direct money. It is easy to say, but difficult to kind of, really absorb as a concept. So the right mindset for a franchisor and a franchisee to have. And in my experience, that is very important. The second part is, I think I want to touch base, since you work in the US, franchise financing is very important part of franchising in the US. And I know how big it is. In this part of the world, franchising is not as financed by the institutions as much. It predominantly is self-funded, right? So that's why I think that gap which is there in our market. So how a franchisee should kind of really approach the funding part of it. So these two, I think if I can get some very, very short sort of feedback on that.
Yeah. So, well, the first one is the mindset. So the mindset for the franchisor and the franchisee has to be long-term. It has to be mutual success, right? So franchisee has to look at their 5 to 7 year plan, because there's going to be bumps and bruises. Even if it's not the concept's fault, there's just bound to be growing pains along the way. Somebody needs to stick with it, and they need to keep reminding themselves why they're doing this. If they put themselves on the path when they start to build a company that's going to make them 10 times their investment or more, then they just need to keep thinking that way. In the same way with the franchisors have to look at their franchisees as partners. They get all the benefit of using a franchisee's money and their personal guarantees and their operations, paying them fees and royalties, raising the value of their stock. Franchisees don't get any of that, right? So the franchise, it's lopsided. The franchisees make the franchisor a lot more than the franchisor makes the franchisees. So franchisors should think about that. They should be kind, and they should be trying to help their franchisees. They should do whatever they can so that their franchisees want to keep opening up more of their stores. It'll pay for itself 100-fold. And so that's one piece. The other piece on the financing, I actually think the best way to get funded is through limited partnerships. And so I think if you look at, like, most of our franchises have a 30 to 50% ROI, four-wall ROI. So when we look at what does it cost to open a store, what does it make in profit, if it makes between 30 and 50% profit return on your investment, then franchisees will keep opening. And there's also enough money in there that you could pay limited partnerships, right? So like right now, a very popular thing, I'm in a group called Young Presidents, and there's a very popular thing right now that a bunch of YPOers want to invest in successful franchisees or successful operators. So if somebody already owns 2 or 3 of something, they've already proven that they're successful, and now it's less risky. So if the risky part was that person getting 1 location open, then it's less risky when he opens 2. At some point, it goes from a fad to a trend. The minute that franchisee looks like he knows what he's doing, he just needs the capital, the fuel, like it's putting fuel on a fire. That franchisee, that's a very safe investment. And especially if there's 30 to 50% four-wall ROI, there's plenty of money in there. Because like right now, the stock market's not on fire. It's up, down, up, down, up, down. Real estate's not on fire. Where are you going to go get 10, 20% return on your money? There's not a lot of places. But if you can invest, if you just do this model, if you just sort of go through and like, I'm going to open up a franchise, I'm going to get a return on my money along the way, that profit's going to go open up more stores and more stores. And then that profit's going to open more stores and more stores. So you take your investors along with the same compounded ride that you are. And then you have a liquidity event at the end where the franchisee benefits on the buyout too. Then if you make 1 or 2 investors successful, then you'll never look for money, because those investors know other people with money. So if it were me, I would not go do it with loans, because loans are personally guaranteed, they're collateralized, they're constrictive. I would much rather go out, and you think about, like, we get 10 leads a day, 10 people inquire to want to be a franchisee of ours every single day. Sure. And so only 1 or 2 of them really should be franchisees. The rest of them have money. They want to be in the restaurant business. They might be a doctor or a lawyer or something like that. They should not own a restaurant. And so those folks are the ideal ones to go to. If they're a high net worth individual and you say, look, why don't we take your capital and put it behind somebody that's already proven and successful? You still get to say you're in the restaurant business. You're going to get way better returns than you're going to get anywhere else, but you're also not going to be required for the day-to-day operations. So for me, if it were me, that's what I would do right now. And I think it's a perfect time because of what's happening right now with COVID. As sad as COVID is, and it's sad, I'm not trying to be tone deaf, but as sad as COVID is, at least here in the States, 30%, maybe 50% of restaurants are going to close and not reopen. You still have the same number of people waking up hungry every single day that now have 30 to 50% fewer places to go eat from. That's why you keep seeing articles in the States of restaurant sales that are high, like for the pizza guys and the drive-through guys. It's because of supply and demand imbalance. So like right now is a perfect time because sales are robust. You can get very inexpensive, low cost conversions. Like I did when I first grew Five Guys, we converted these things very cheaply. You have landlords. Oh my God, I've never seen landlords as humble as they are right now for a client that'll come in and pay rent. And so it's the perfect storm. So like right now is a perfect time to go out, and in your ROI, we normally would get 30 to 50% ROI in a brand new build out. If you're doing that same thing with a conversion, you're
Sure.
going to get 50 to 100% ROI. So there's enough money in there to really incentivize some investors. But I would do it through limited partnerships.
I think that is so important, and I think your understanding of franchise financing is so critical, and it's very apt to let's say people in this part of the world because and Sachin can add in here that our Sachin and our company would manage over 1 million people database. There are over 150,000 franchisees in India, and majority of them would be these independent franchisees who are actually putting their own money. But what I'm actually hearing from you is that if they make that first or second franchisee successful, and then have that mindset to grow it, and investment then can come in. I think it's very important to actually to coach franchisees. I think that part is missing, and that's a very interesting part to take from this conversation. And conversion franchise, it wasn't happening as much in this part of the world, but now I think in past couple of years we do have an arm who does that, and there is a certain amount of momentum which has come in. And I think, as you mentioned, it's very similar situation here, although we are two different markets. There about 30-35% of stores are not opening back, and those locations are available. So people should look at acquiring those locations and opening good brands. So that's very interesting. Sachin, I think we have another 2 minutes because Dan has another meeting. Sachin, do you want to come in?
I don't know at this point, Ravi. He's asking that if he wants to launch a brand in UK, US, does he necessarily need to open first store in US, or is there a law? So I just want you to respond to him so that he.
Do you have to? No. Should you? Yes, because a concept really, because we see this a lot too, where people they want franchisees to take all the risk and they don't want to take the risk. The message that you're sending somebody is it's not good enough for my money, but it's okay for your money. And so I think for a concept, if they're really going to build, and you saw that, I don't want to name names, but if I think a concept, if it's coming here, they should open one. And it would be easy too. There's a humongous Indian business community here. Somebody should tap into that and say, who wants to joint venture with me? I want to open up 2 or 3 stores in, Washington, for example. And then I want to let those 2 or 3 grow to 10 using this blitzscaling idea. And I'm going to take that model and I'm going to show franchisees how successful the business is with my money. Because I think if you're not willing to invest your own money in something, people will smell that. People will see that. Now, it depends, because if a concept already has 100 or 200 stores, or if they're all successful in different countries anyways, then it's not important that you go open up a store in each new country you're going into. But if it was a startup, we actually had somebody from like Estonia or something like that say that they want to open up a burger brand in the States. They just wanted us to sell the franchise. And I said, well, how many locations do you have in Estonia? And I think it was 2. And when I asked him about his numbers, his numbers were terrible. And it's like, so you have only 2 lousy locations, but you think you want to come to the States and you want other people to put up the money. I said, good luck. It's not for me. So remember I said I need to say no more often. That was an example. I'm proud of myself. I said no.
Excellent. I know you've got a meeting to catch up in.
I gotta run.
We'll not hold you back. So thank you very much from my side. Venus, you want to thank Dan for his.
I think there's so many points. In fact, I can do a post-op sort of blog on this. But I think one big point which I'm taking is have end in first. End first is very important as a mindset, both for the franchisor. In fact, for the franchisee, that was revealing for me that even as a franchisee, you don't have to think small. You should actually look at compounding the number of units and actually creating wealth. So that's very interesting. And the concept of blitz scaling, it's I've actually would study more about it, Dan. And if possible, I would actually get about 100 odd franchisor and franchisee and do a workshop with you and kind of train them. So I hope you will be available for that. Thank you so much today for this, Dan. And this is very interesting. And this, I mean, we really in this part of the world get a lot of not just inspiration. I think it's a direct export of franchise concepts and very influenced by American franchising. And I think your learnings are very valuable. And we will try and spread this as much as possible. Thank you so much. And any last words, Dan?
No, I'm good. Thank you for having me. And anytime, let me know anytime.
Thank you so much.
Follow Dan and Venus on LinkedIn. They're very active and they give some very insightful information there. So thank you very much. Thank you very much everyone for joining, and thank you Dan and Venus for your valuable time.